Modern Mahjong's back with our next Tile Time series. Let's say these were the tiles you have at the end of the Charleston. 2 flowers, a 1 dot, 2 6 dots, 2 6 crack, a joker, an 8 crack, a 4 bam, a 5 bam, a south, and a red. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you could take the time to pause and put these tiles on your rack or get a pen and paper and write them down. So we find it's really helpful if you rearrange your tiles in different ways. It'll sometimes help you see things. In ascending order, you can see flowers 4, 5, 6, 6, 6, and that might make you realize that you have several tiles towards this consecutive run hand that's been very popular this year. 5 flowers, 3 singles of 1, 2, 3, and then 2 pungs in the next highest number. So you would have 2 of the flowers, you'd have the 4 and 5, you'd be missing the 3, you'd be able to call the 6s for both the dots and the cracks, because it has to be in 3 suits, and you could actually move the joker over here to get closer to your flowers. Your turn, and you pick in a flower. So you discard the south. Then on your next turn, let's say you pick in a 6 dot. So what we usually do is when we pick in a tile, plop it on one side. We don't what we call filing your tile, because that's let people know that you need that tile. So let's say you look at your tiles and you discard the 1 dot. So what hand are you thinking of still? So you have plenty of flowers, you have matching numbers with the 6s, you have 1 dragon, and you still have several tiles towards that consecutive run. But it's always important to have a backup hand and to plan ahead for what would you call. If someone threw a flower now, would you call the quint? Because there's 2 quints of flowers on the card. So you would be committed to basically the consecutive run, or if you picked a ton of jokers, to the quint hand. Would you call a 6 dot or 6 crack if someone threw it? Planning ahead is really helpful and really helps you keep pace with the game. So how many tiles do you have towards that hand in the consecutive run? You joker. So unfortunately, in this hypothetical game, what if someone exposed 3 bams, a pung of them, and then someone just threw the last 3 bam? So that hand is no longer winnable. You don't have a dead hand because you don't have any exposures that it could only be that hand, but you can no longer win on consecutive run number 6. So what would your backup hand be? How will you pivot? And this is a really great way of increasing your strategy and your ability to win. So if you look over at the any like numbers hands, there's 4 flowers and then 3 different exposures of like numbers, 2 pungs and a com. And the color on the card does not mean that the green has to be 3 green of your number, meaning bam. It could be any 3 exposures using the same number. So it does not dictate which is the com. So let's say you have somebody throwing a flower. Well, you would have enough to call and make that exposure here with 3 flowers. If somebody threw a 6, you would be able to call the 6 dot for the com. You would be able to call the 6 for the pung. And if you picked in 1 more 6 bam or a joker, you'd be able to call the 6 bam. So this shows how having a backup hand and being aware of how the hands relate is really helpful in improving your strategy. If someone threw, let's say your next pick was a joker, and at that point you can get rid of your, let's say 8 crack. If someone threw a 6 bam, would you call it with the 2 jokers? So that always depends on how far along you are and how many of your different groupings in your hand you can call. So let's say you do call the 6 bam. We recommend you putting it all the way to the left, because then that gives no information about your hand. If for some reason, let's say you had an extra 6 bam in your hand, we love to do what we call hugging the jokers. So if for some reason the 6 bam was a com, we like putting the jokers in the middle because then they don't get confused with the next exposure. But since you only have 1, that's fine. So if you call the 6 bam, and then you throw the 4 bam, you are now set to call every other exposure for this hand. You're set to call the flower for a Kong, you're set to call the 6 dot for a Kong, and you're set to call the 6 crack for a Pung. So we hope this is really helpful, and would love to know from you if this was a helpful exercise and if we should continue doing these on Facebook Live or Zoom and sharing on YouTube. Thanks so much. Have a great day.